There was a man whom the greatest warriors of the Mahabharata feared, a man so powerful that defeating him seemed almost impossible. A man whom even Lord Krishna could not ignore, yet he was not a god. He was not immortal, he was not born unbeatable, he was a human being. Then how did he reach such an extraordinary level? What transformed Devavrata into Bhishma, and what price did he pay for that greatness? To understand Bhishma, we must begin with his birth. His father was Shantanu, the king of Hastinapura, a respected ruler of the Kuru dynasty. His mother was Ganga. From the beginning, Devavrata was no ordinary child. But his greatness did not come from his birth alone. What separated him from everyone else was the way he was trained. According to the Mahabharata, Devavrata received education from the greatest masters of his time. He did not learn from one teacher, he learned from many. Each master shaped a different part of him. He learned wisdom from great sages. He learned statecraft, diplomacy, governance. He learned warfare, discipline, self-control. Most princes were trained to become rulers. Devavrata was trained to become exceptional, and the most important part of his training was mastery over himself. Every warrior can attack, very few can restrain themselves. As Devavrata grew older, his reputation spread quickly. His intelligence impressed scholars, his courage impressed warriors, his discipline impressed everyone. People began seeing in him the future king of Hastinapura. And honestly, they had every reason to. He possessed everything a king could want: strength, wisdom, skill, discipline, leadership. The throne was waiting for him, but destiny had other plans, because one day, King Shantanu met a woman, and that meeting would change Devavrata's entire life. The woman's name was Satyavati. Shantanu wanted to marry her, but there was a problem. Satyavati's father had a condition that threatened Devavrata's future. He wanted assurance that Satyavati's son would inherit the throne, not Devavrata. Shantanu could not accept this, and Devavrata knew it. For the first time, he faced a choice that would decide whether he became an ordinary king or something far greater, and that decision would earn him a name the world would remember for thousands of years. Devavrata went directly to Satyavati's father. He listened carefully to his condition. The man wanted certainty. He feared one thing: even if Satyavati married Shantanu, Devavrata would eventually become king. And after him, Devavrata's sons would inherit the throne. But Devavrata's response shocked him. He gave up his claim to the throne completely. The future king of Hastinapura walked away from a kingdom. But Devavrata knew the problem remained. Even without the throne, his future children could still claim it. The conflict could return. The kingdom could face another succession struggle. So, Devavrata made a second vow. A vow so extreme that history still remembers it. He vowed never to marry. He vowed lifelong celibacy. No wife, no children, no descendants, no family of his own. In that moment, he sacrificed three things: power, love, and legacy. Devavrata abandoned all three for the sake of his father, for the stability of the kingdom. It was this vow that earned him the name Bhishma. Bhishma means the one who took the terrible vow. And from that moment, his life no longer belonged to himself, it belonged to duty. That is what made Bhishma different. His discipline was not measured in days or months, it was measured in decades. The sacrifice did not happen once, it happened every day. That is what made it extraordinary. The more he gave up, the stronger he became. Because most people are controlled by desire, Bhishma had voluntarily surrendered the things that control most human beings. That gave him a rare kind of freedom, a freedom that made him extremely difficult to influence, extremely difficult to tempt, extremely difficult to corrupt. Kings respected him, warriors respected him, even his enemies respected him. Because everyone knew Bhishma could not be bought, he could not be manipulated or distracted. His loyalty belonged to his duty alone. As years passed, his reputation continued growing, a warrior unlike any other, and then came the man who would test him, a warrior feared across all of Bharat, a man whose name alone made kings tremble, Parashurama. The teacher of warriors, the destroyer of kings, the man who had challenged entire dynasties. And one day, Bhishma would stand against him. The battle that followed would become one of the most famous confrontations in the Mahabharata, because for the first time, the world would see just how powerful Bhishma had truly become. The conflict began with a woman named Amba. Her story is long, but it eventually led to a confrontation between Bhishma and Parashurama. This was no ordinary duel. Parashurama was considered one of the greatest warriors to ever live. He had defeated kings. He had defeated armies. He had terrified entire kingdoms, and he had once been Bhishma's teacher. Now, teacher and student stood on opposite sides. Neither man was willing to back down. The battle began. Then it continued, and continued. Days passed. Neither warrior could defeat the other. The duel became legendary. Because the impossible was happening, a human warrior was standing against Parashurama as an equal. For years, Bhishma had sacrificed comfort. For years, he had sacrificed pleasure. For years, he had sacrificed personal ambition. Now the results were becoming visible. His discipline had become strength, his strength had become mastery, and his mastery had become fearsome. Eventually the conflict ended without a decisive victory. But the message was clear. Bhishma was no ordinary warrior. He had entered a category occupied by only a handful of men. As the years passed, his reputation continued growing. Generations came and went, kings rose and fell. Yet Bhishma remained, advising rulers, protecting Hastinapura. Then came the greatest crisis of his life, the conflict between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. Bhishma loved the Pandavas, yet when war arrived, he stood with the Kauravas. Why? Because Bhishma had sworn his loyalty to the throne of Hastinapura, not to individuals or personal preferences, but to the throne, and Bhishma never broke a vow. This decision created one of the greatest tragedies of his life. A man who understood Dharma was forced to fight for a side he knew was flawed. This is what makes Bhishma such a fascinating character. His strength was extraordinary. But his life was not simple. The same vow that made him great also became his burden. The same discipline that gave him power also trapped him. And now, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, the entire world would witness just how dangerous Bhishma had become. Day after day, he devastated enemy forces. Commanders feared facing him. Even the Pandavas struggled to stop him. Then came a moment involving Krishna. Before the war began, Krishna had made a promise that he would not wield weapons. He would not personally fight. But Bhishma fought with such ferocity that something remarkable happened. Krishna's promise began to break. At one point, seeing Arjuna overwhelmed, Krishna leaped from the chariot. He charged toward Bhishma, ready to attack, ready to break his own vow. The man revered as divine was prepared to abandon his own promise, because Bhishma's power had become that overwhelming, and Bhishma's reaction was equally remarkable. He was ready to face Krishna himself. That moment became immortal, because it revealed the level Bhishma had reached. Yet despite all his power, his discipline, his victories, Bhishma still possessed one weakness, a weakness no weapon could remove, and eventually, that weakness would bring the greatest warrior of Hastinapura to the ground. The weakness was, Bhishma had spent his entire life honoring his vows, even when the cost was painful, even when the consequences were tragic. That same commitment created a vulnerability. Eventually, Bhishma had to abandon his weapons, because of a promise given to a woman, Amba, that whenever she appears in front of him, on the battlefield, he'll abandon his weapons. Arjuna released a storm of arrows. The warrior who had terrified entire armies finally fell, but even in defeat, Bhishma remained extraordinary. His body never touched the ground. The arrows held him up, creating the famous bed of arrows. Most warriors would have died. Bhishma did not, because many decades earlier, his father had granted him a remarkable boon, the power to choose the moment of his death. Bhishma remained alive, lying upon arrows, watching the war continue and history unfold, and this is where the story becomes profound. The most powerful warrior in the Mahabharata did not spend his final moments speaking about victory. He spoke about wisdom, duty, leadership, and dharma. Kings came to listen. Warriors came to listen. Even after falling, he remained a teacher. Eventually, when the proper time arrived, Bhishma chose to leave his mortal body. And this brings us back to the question we asked at the beginning. How did a human being reach such an extraordinary level? Was it talent? Partly. Was it training? Partly. But neither explains Bhishma. Many warriors were talented, many warriors were trained. Only one became Bhishma. What made him different was his willingness to sacrifice. Again and again, he chose duty over desire, and over time, those choices transformed him. Bhishma paid that price for an entire lifetime. That is why his story survived. Bhishma is remembered because he proved what disciplined sacrifice can turn a human being into. The power was impressive, the warrior was impressive, but neither was his greatest achievement. His greatest achievement was mastery over himself, and that is why thousands of years later, the name Bhishma still commands respect. Consider subscribing for more wisdom.